And then I found HGH, the human growth hormone. And I'm feeling so young now, and I'm looking so young now, and I'm a doctor, and I can tell you this is good. Y'all seen the commercials, right? What does it do? When do we need growth hormone? Okay. Always. That's good. Because most of the time, I'm told while we're growing. Well, yeah, because that's what we associate it with. You know, itty bitty baby's born, itty bitty baby has to become an adult, and then it's like, okay, we don't need any more growth hormone. Actually, we need it 24/7, 365. Y'all know what I'm going to say, 366 if it's a leap year. Why? Do you know what growth hormone does? It's very important. One of the biggest jobs that growth hormone does, it helps us utilize nutrients correctly so that the cells of our body can grow and do their jobs. Well, one chemical that we have, somatostatin, and it is one that you will hear, okay? This one is a growth hormone inhibiting hormone. The body, at certain times, will need to release this, all right? And the reason that I'm talking about this is because it's one that's very associated with the digestive system, but our endocrine system plays part in it, okay? So it's not really one of those 6 that's kind of listed, okay, but it kind of plays into it. And what somatostatin will do, it will act by inhibiting secretion of my thyroid stimulating hormone. Do what? Why is it that it would act on my thyroid hormone? When do I need thyroid hormone? You just told me. We need it a lot. Okay? Why? Now, tell, I love that question. Why? What does thyroid hormone do? It does, because one of the things that will happen, that hormone will also work for the body to utilize nutrients correctly. And the goal of that one is to make sure we maintain the body temperature. So that one's a pretty important hormone. Huh. Why would I want to inhibit that?
Maybe you want to make a fever in the body, like infection.
Well, that becomes part of the immune system, but it wants to help regulate it so that our temperature of the body doesn't go too high or too low. So it can help with that. It can also inhibit insulin secretion, meaning we might need to get that glucose to the cells. But now, wait a minute. What is this glucagon? In a way, it has the glucose components. Do you guys remember learning about how when we take in foodstuffs, if the body doesn't use them immediately, we can store them, okay? So what it can do is it can stop that secretion, and what we're doing is we're going to pull materials, like from fat cells and stuff like that, use it as energy for the body. So it can work in that way. The other part, somatostatin, and this is one of the things that comes along with this whole GI business. How many of y'all ate breakfast this morning?
Does ice cream count?
Sure.
Oh,
It's got dairy and carbs, and I guess we could look at protein from the milk in it. So yeah, we can count that. I believe in counting cake. That's breakfast. Just saying. So remember, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now, why would I need to slow down my gut activity after eating a meal?
So you already store some
Well, not yet. We got to get to that point. The storing of the energy. Got to absorb it. If we didn't slow down that activity after eating a meal, the foodstuffs would go through you real quick. Think about the ramifications of that. Just saying. Okay, think about it. Use your imagination. So, we want to take those foodstuffs. We want them to break down properly. We want them to pass through the small intestine so that they can encounter tons of blood vessels. And we can get those nutrients to the bloodstream so that we can get it to the cells, so the cells can use those nutrients correctly based on the growth hormone and the thyroid hormone that will then get to be released. Is that not cool? Think about that. So, this is kind of a special one, okay? The somatostatin. And one of the biggest times is after eating that this is going to come into play. So, in my hypothalamus, it's either going to be a releasing or inhibiting hormone. So those 6 can pass by way of the blood, because that's going to be the anterior, okay? And it makes its way to the anterior pituitary, and then it tells the anterior pituitary's cells what to do. So, in that anterior pituitary, we're going to find quite a few hormones. Now, in the anterior pituitary, 2 of them are termed gonadotropins. If you remember from bio, the ovaries and the testes are gonads. They produce egg and sperm. That is controlled by these chemicals. So we're going to see that we have our follicle stimulating hormone. Now, in a female who has ovaries, do you happen to remember what the follicle was in the ovary? when the egg is getting made, all right, and you know how because you have if the two ovaries are functioning, we only release one egg at roughly every 28 days, and it alternates ovaries, okay? So that egg that is now formed, that will be spit out of the ovary, literally, okay? When it gets spit out, that was a follicle that it was sitting in, all right? Then it becomes the job of that follicle to produce some hormones to get the uterus ready for implantation of the fertilized egg. Now, in a male, the spermatic cords that are in the scrotum, those are producing the sperm that will make their way to the epididymis and eventually out through the penis. And that is done by these hormones acting on those cords. The little follicles is what they have creating the sperm. So follicle stimulating hormone, it's going to help the sex hormones of the ovaries and the testes get the egg out and get the sperm out. And that's what they're doing. Luteinizing hormone, the LH, in females, it will help stimulate ovulation, the forming of that egg, about roughly every 28 days. And then, once the egg is released, that follicle, remember how I was saying it needed to produce stuff? Okay? When the egg spits out, the remaining portion of that area, it develops this covering in the follicle, becomes what's known as the corpus luteum, and that will secrete progesterone, which works on the lining of the uterus to get it ready for implantation of the fertilized egg. In males, luteinizing hormone stimulates the testes to secrete testosterone, which will in turn help sperm production. So these two, FSH and LH, these are my gonadotropins because they're working on the ovaries and the testes. The remaining four that come from my hypothalamus to my anterior pituitary, they're going to go and target different tissues. Like I said, they have to have the receptors on their cells because even though it's going to target tissues, it's at the cellular level that they work.
Is prolactin considered
Now, prolactin, for the most part, we would be under inhibiting because the only time that that should be releasing is almost at the time of birth and after birth. Other than that, the rest of the time in your body, it should be inhibiting. Is that always the case? Because there are times that these hormones can go wrong, and yes, it can create milk production. So the remaining four, we have our thyroid stimulating hormone. Well, where do you think that's going to go? The thyroid, okay? So this is also known as thyrotropin. If you've ever had to have blood work done, you may see that term on your blood work. What it wants to do, stimulate the growth of the thyroid gland and secretion of the thyroid hormone. So we will get information to release it. Anterior will say or release TSH, which will make its way to the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland will